Okay. And I don't even know why that was important, but working for Darden. But the thing is that I don't know why that was important. I'm sorry. Give me a minute. This is what happens when there's so much going on, and I need someone to not just know what's going on, but why it's impacting me, the way that it's impacting me. So we're going to just start from there. A year and some change. Right here where I live, because my daughter's fiance passed away like unexpectedly, and they had just gotten to New York, and they were starting off this. They'd just gotten engaged, and they had all these goals, and she was going to go to Vermont. I don't understand why, as a young black girl, what you going to do in Vermont? But it was just, look, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just trying to say, what are you going to do in Vermont? Because my children are all black. They're not all black, but their father is black. And anyways, I went back to my childhood state in the Midwest. One of them, there were several states that I was bounced around in, but there was one particular one where the trial happened and finalized, and where I was shipped out of, and that was in Joplin, Missouri. So I went back to face the trauma, because I was determined to break this cycle. God showed me when I was 6 or 7 through a spirit named Araminta that I carried her soul, and I was going to bring more of God's children to freedom. And I did not want to do that because I knew the monsters I was up against. And I was scared. I was outnumbered all the time. My first bullies were at home. Then they were in school. Over time, the dyslexia, the disabilities, they became harder because my brain just was becoming more and more overloaded with fight or flight, survival mode, tunnel visions, whatever I had to do to get my children to a new year. And I would always try to build myself and heal myself throughout the waves, but I never could seem to juggle all of it. And then it was like if I was saying to people, look, I can't seem to manage to go to school and work at the same time and raise the children, because my mind, I always had thoughts. It was like they used to tell me ADHD, but then recently they did some test and they said that they don't think it's ADHD. And then I'm just like, okay, so what the fuck is it? But it still could be related to the trauma. I do have PTSD and generalized anxiety. So with generalized anxiety, when there's a lot of stressors going on at one time, it can create an overload in the brain, and then knowing this, taking accountability with this, and saying, okay, this is your problem. It's not your fault that you got this and that it happened to you. However, one pastor, when I questioned him on some passages, meanings, reflections, different interpretations that I was having of the same scripture, I was angry in one of my sessions with him, and I said, I don't understand this, and I get really angry with God because this is not fair. That man looked at me dead in my eyes and said, nowhere in the Bible does it say life is fair. And actually, for his chosen people, his believers, his followers, it's actually a lot harder. So then I'm staring at him, And I'm thinking, that's not designed by God, though. That rocky road, those trials and tribulations, that's because people make it harder to reach God, to journey with God, to live with God, to walk with the joy of God in your heart. And they are slandering God and Jesus in the process because they're making it look like they're future faking. And that's where the mindset of slavery has infected the theology. So, the way to keep slaves in mental prison is, or to under oppression, is through mental health. So, once I really began to zone in and figure that out and crack that little code, I had to do whatever was possible to make sure I still now began to shield my heart. So all those spaces where I didn't know I could say no without severe consequences. So I would always say yes, or you would call it a people pleaser. I would take on more than I should, and I would give more than I had, to the point where I had nothing left. And then my family's over here spending money on bullshit. And I'm thinking, you spend $1 million on furniture. Do you know what I could have done with $1 million? I would have had land. I would have had something stable for me and my own children, even if I never got the education. Because if I didn't know anything, my grandfather taught me how to work that land. And if I had my own water source as well, but I don't need it because he taught me how to do it without all of that. And I learned even more growing up and trying to maintain his teaching and his memory in me. Because you get lost in these streets and their sheets and all of that in between, you lose. It's like technology. You don't use it, you lose it. Because it's always and forever advancing and changing. One code is never the same. After you create that new 1010, then it's not going to be the same. So I learned these things early on because I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to go from victim to victorious because I didn't want anyone feeling sorry for me. I didn't want my brother raised me to be a samurai. Do you know how many nights he trained me on the movie Karate Kid? Like, don't fuck with us. No, but he was heavy in martial art and swords, and he taught me a lot because he had to teach me self-defense and how to fight. I didn't though. Mine was more my screaming, my yelling. It was stranger danger all the way. I mean, I have gotten into fights, but it was never started by me. But it was provoked, and then there would be, reactive abuse, and I had to learn that, and I had to learn how to master that and to prevent that. I mean, I believe in synchronicities, and my alarm went off because normally I'm at work, and that would have been my indication that it's time to now go to break because I try not to look at my clock when I was at work. And you know what? My family would know that. They would know. People around me, they would learn and study, okay, if you work her up, if you push her, she will react. and then we can use her reaction against her. That's how my family worked. That's how people that I was in relationships that somehow would then benefit from my family even after the end of the relationship. And so it started to make me feel very paranoid over how much control was my family really in, and the mix of the chaos that continued to follow me in my life. Because when you are rich and your arms reach long, and you are religious and your arms reach long, or you are political and your arms reach long, you can do a lot of damage if you decide to abuse your power. And the cops I've known, Michael, my ex-husband, he used to brag all the time about how his dad was a dirty cop in Puerto Rico, and they did a lot of bad things and got away with a lot of bad stuff. So then when they bought that gun with the scope, and then they were shooting it in practice next to the window where I was at in the shed, it scared me, and I knew I had to get out of there. My children were stuck in this, and I didn't know what to do. I had one son in a studio apartment that I was trying to do everything I could to keep it going so he could get to Gainesville, which I didn't even want him here because I needed to get out of this. But the only way the ex-husband said that I could get out of the divorce is if I walked away with nothing. And I had to stay there with him. And I had to promise him, because I told him the only way I could get health insurance was if I lied. I said the only way I could get help, well, I haven't actually been able to get successful health insurance, but I told him the only way was if we got a divorce. And then he said I had to promise that we would get remarried, and I had to leave everything behind when I went to Missouri, to the Midwest, to go face some trauma, and my son was still here stuck with him. And I made the deal because I needed out, and I was going to die in that shed. I was gonna die. I tried to go to the police here in Gainesville. I went to the emergency room. I told him I was hearing voices. I wasn't, but I needed him to take me because I was gonna try to get them to Baker Act me so that they would help me. The nurse saw that something was wrong, and I kept telling her what was going on. I told the police officer, I asked him if he was recording because I didn't trust him. He told me I was reaching. He basically told me it was all in my head, even though I was in a shed. So they didn't Baker Act me. And I really just wanted the safety because but I had to go back. And then from there I went to Peaceful Paths. And then from there I flew out, but my son was still here. My daughter was with her boyfriend in Sarasota at the time, and then eventually, or Bradenton or Sarasota, and then eventually they went to New York when I came back to Florida. I was there for about a year, facing that trauma. There was a house fire. I lost everything, which was the craziest shit. But my foster mom was okay, and that was the most important thing, really. I'm used to losing material stuff, and plus when I left off of that land, I only had a duffel bag with me. It's all I had left of my entire life was a duffel bag and my children were scattered, and everyone's angry at me because I'm accountable for them. They didn't deserve any of this. They didn't deserve any of this. So, after the fire, and I had to make a decision, I had to go. And I was having trouble adjusting to learning the new banking systems with the company that I was working for, because I was actually just starting the trauma recovery at that time, and my brain was definitely not working right. And I was honest, and I told them, But eventually it was the weapon that was formed against me because I needed accommodations, and they didn't want that. They wanted, the company that I worked for was named Alorica. And Alorica said that with the accommodations, I was no longer billable to the client, and we did the work for Ally Bank. We did the customer service. I was great at it. I'm always great at that kind of stuff. It was just I was struggling because once you get out on the actual floors, it was like the leadership there, the way that they do things was different, and it wasn't what I was trained. And then we found out that the training material, well, actually the Alorica training material for Ally Bank was actually supposed to be very advanced. It was actually a really good training environment with good trainers. Kevin and I feel bad that I can't remember the other one's name. I know that he even spelled it differently, but they were amazing trainers. Charles. It was Charles without something. There was something missing in his name, and it was really, really funny, but I don't remember what it was. But his name was Charles, and they were amazing trainers. But when we got on the floor, there were a lot of old-time workers that were doing stuff old ways, and so they weren't doing it like with new stuff that we were trained, and so it was like confusing. Or there was some stuff that was done, and then they had new different ways. It was like it didn't match. There was a disconnect once, and it was because depending on when you were scheduled to log in, they all ran it differently. And then we would get in trouble, or there were programs that we didn't have access to, software in training. So then when we would get out on the actual calls, the problem is that for me, with generalized anxiety and then being right fresh into the trauma recovery, what was happening was that confusion was setting me up for failure. And my primary concern was risking a customer's account, because I take my job, no matter where I'm working or what I'm doing, absolutely serious. It's not because of my image. I don't care. I'm not one of those to do all the dress up. I still wear the same clothes over and over again because I don't have money, first of all, for other things, and two, any money I do have, it's got to go towards what I can pay towards bills, and then medication and food. And I don't live a luxury life. I don't go out. I've been celibate since last year. I don't engage. So anyways, as I was expressing problems, and then it was overwhelming me. People were bouncing me around, pushing me off. Nobody wanted to deal with it. Nobody had time, because it was all about the call handle time, because Alorica had a contract with Ally Bank. So in business, you understand, Alorica makes a certain amount of money per agent, and then per agent gets paid a certain amount of money, and then Alorica keeps the difference. So if I figured out, now I didn't learn this until I was being sucked into the system of it. I mean, I knew how it worked in theory from in the past with the work that I've done in the leadership roles that I've handled. However, I had never really saw it from the eyes of, I knew I was always suffering from some sort of mental illness because of the trauma and the abuse that I was going through. However, I never understood what that actually meant or looked at until I was going through actual, okay, when I was working on my mental health with a true intention of fixing it and paying attention to, okay, why is this happening? Why am I ticking? Why is this little teapot about to go piss and spout? Wait, that's probably not the song, but you know what I'm talking about. So anyways, I was seeing it from a whole different eyes, and I was speaking up about it, and I was like, hold on, wait a minute. I have a disability and I want to do this job. I can do this job. I'm great at this job. When I was on the calls, when I was doing it, I was great. But it was all the behind the scenes confusion and getting in trouble and call times and this and that because I was taking longer to find the answers because I was trying to explore systems that I didn't have the ability to have hands on in the training. And then in the midst of live calls and then having to keep track of call handle times and numbers and it was all about upselling and it's banking. It's the real world of how giants become giants and remain to be the giant, right? And I know Walmart understands this more than anybody in the industry. So I began asking for help, and then that's when the problem started. I took it first to HR because I was trying to see about what can be done because I didn't think it was fair, and it affects my livelihood, and I was still sending half of my check back to my son in Florida, and then anytime my daughter, if she did ask for help, and then the other daughter, I still, just because I was healing and I was at a different location, it didn't, nothing stopped bills wise, nothing stopped parent wise, nothing. And then I still had to pay so much and do so much just to be where I was. It's not like I had a free place to live, you know what I'm saying? And so life doesn't stop lifing, and nobody seems to really care about mental health, restoring trust. They collect a lot of money on mental health awareness, but as a victim fighting to always be victorious, there's no help without gross violations involved. Being a guinea pig. My family used to monitor me, record me, without my permission all the time, and that creates a space of paranoia, that creates a space of not being able to trust anybody, because then they don't just record, they manipulate it, or they use it, they exploit it, and they'll cut it off, they won't show a full thing of it, they'll only show a clip of this and that. And so at first, everyone would convince me that was just all in my head, but that was real. Those things really happen. And then I notice that it happens in the workforce and it's happening in relationships. People do that, and it's like they'll exploit because they know somehow through 6 degrees of separation of the community and village that has had years of being able to abuse and exploit people. They know how to make people tick, and so healing is challenging because when they do see you heal, they've got to turn it up a notch, right? So when I had to come back to Gainesville, because this is where my son was, the fire happened, and Alorica did tell me that they would transfer me and I'd have a job no matter what, and so they even said that if I purchased my own private laptop that I would have this one job where I could travel no matter where I'm at with it. Hold on.